Rocky moved slowly along the mountainside, his breath heavy in the thin, cold air. The late sun cast long golden streaks across the jagged rocks, painting his thin frame with light, yet his eyes still burned with determination. In his chest lived a fragile but unshakable belief that somewhere beyond these ridges, his parents were waiting. The day slipped away. Hunger gnawed at his belly and his legs trembled with each step. When the ridge fell into shadow and night thickened across the land, Rocky spotted something below, tucked into a valley. A village. Smoke rose gently from wooden chimneys carrying the scent of burning pine. It was a smell of warmth of life, and it made his chest ache. His instincts pulled him closer, though his heart hesitated at the scent of people. The dirt path into the village glowed faintly under lantern light. Rocky crept forward, ears pulled back, his dark eyes scanning for scraps. His stomach growled loudly in the silence. Ahead stood a small wooden house, its garden fenced with crooked rails. By the dim glow of an oil lamp, an old man with silver hair hammered boards into the fence. His frame was lean, his hands rough, but his movements steady. The firelight brushed across his worn face, revealing a kind, tired gentleness. Rocky edged closer, nose twitching at the faint smell of food drifting from inside. He placed each paw carefully tail, low, ready to bolt. The old man lifted his head. His weary eyes met Rocky's burning black gaze. For a long moment, both froze, the starving wild dog trembling from hunger, the old man pausing mid-swing with his hammer. Then the silence shattered. From behind the house came frantic flapping feathers, flying cries of panic. A pack of wolves had crept from the tree line, their golden eyes glowing like fire. They circled the chicken coop bodies, low teeth glinting. Inside, the hens shrieked in terror. The old man's face drained of color. He grabbed a stick, but his hand shook. He knew he couldn't fight them alone. In that heartbeat, Rocky lunged forward. A deep growl rumbled from his chest as he charged. His roar cut through the night, startling the wolves. The scarred leader, a massive beast with a jagged wound across its cheek, snarled back and attacked. Rocky met it head-on. He slipped past its first strike, but claws raked across his shoulder, pain burning down his side. Blood streaked his fur, but he refused to fall. His stance widened, teeth bared, fire blazing in his eyes. Another wolf lunged at the coop, but Rocky snapped his jaws around its neck and dragged it back with a furious shake. Chickens scattered feathers burst into the air. The old man, trembling but desperate, swung his stick and struck another wolf trying to flank. The blow was weak, but enough to buy Rocky space. The scarred leader charged again, faster, harder. Their bodies collided, a storm of fur and teeth. Claws ripped the dirt, jaws snapped with bone-crushing force. Rocky was shoved back, his paws skidding across the ground. Blood dripped from his wound, yet he stood firm. With a sudden surge, he clamped down on the wolf's throat, teeth sinking deep. The beast howled, thrashed, then stumbled back in agony. The pack faltered. Their leader's cry broke their rhythm. For a moment, silence hung heavy, the night filled only with the rustle of wings and the old man's ragged breath. Rocky lifted his head, chest heaving, blood staining his fur. He roared again, louder, stronger, his voice rolling across the valley. The old man joined him, shouting hoarsely, slamming his stick against the ground. The echoes rang sharp, defiant. The wolves hesitated, their golden eyes wavering. Then, one by one, they backed away. The scarred leader limped into the trees, and the rest melted into the shadows. Silence returned, broken only by Rocky's ragged breathing. Rocky staggered, his body trembling. Blood seeped from his shoulder, dripping to the dirt. The old man dropped his stick and approached slowly, eyes wet with awe. "You brave thing," he whispered, voice shaking. "You saved me." He reached down, his rough hand resting gently on Rocky's head. For the first time, Rocky didn't pull away. His eyes closed, his body swayed, but he allowed the touch. In that simple gesture, he felt something he had lost long ago: warmth, trust, a bond. The old man guided him inside. The wooden cabin glowed with firelight, the smell of pine smoke filling the room. He set down a piece of bread and a strip of salted meat. Rocky devoured it, each bite pulling him back from the edge of weakness. The old man sat nearby, watching his lips moving in a quiet murmur. "It's been so long since I've seen such courage," he said, almost to himself. "Maybe heaven sent you here." When Rocky finished, his legs buckled. He collapsed on the floor, sides heaving. The old man fetched cloth, wiped the blood from his shoulder, and pressed herbs into the wound. Rocky whimpered at the sting, but didn't resist. His eyes fluttered shut, his breath easing. That night, Rocky slept inside the cabin. The wind still howled through the valley. The forest still whispered of danger. But for the first time in many nights, Rocky rested in peace. On the floor of a stranger's home, with the fire's warmth on his fur and the touch of a human hand still lingering, Rocky felt something new. It wasn't just safety. It was belonging. Time in the little village passed in quiet rhythms. Rocky's wounds slowly healed under the old man's care. He would lie on the porch as the man worked, or keep guard near the chicken coop, so no wild beasts dared return. Day by day, the wildness in his eyes softened. For the first time in his wandering life, Rocky felt almost at peace, almost as if he had found a home. The villagers began to notice him. Some felt pity, leaving scraps of bread near his paws. A shy child once set down a small bowl of water. Rocky lifted his head, wagged his tail gently, and in that moment he felt kindness, not just from one man, but from many. Soon the children adored him, running to stroke his dark fur. Rocky no longer flinched away. Instead, he met them with gentle eyes and a slow, wagging tail. Yet Rocky knew peace was fragile. Wolves never forgot defeat. At twilight, he often stood on the hill above the houses, nose lifted, ears sharp, watching the edge of the forest. Sometimes he caught the glint of eyes flickering like fireflies between the trees. On the wind drifted the bitter scent of hunger, the acrid musk of wolves. Rocky knew they were gathering. This time, they would not come for chickens. They would come for revenge. One evening, the sky grew heavy with clouds, the wind restless. Rocky could not sit still. He raced through the dirt lanes, barking sharp and urgent. At first, villagers thought he was restless, but the old man understood. Placing a hand on Rocky's head, he whispered, "They're coming tonight. Aren't they, buddy?" Then Rocky's growl rose into a call, deep, commanding. From every corner of the village, dogs answered. One voice after another joined until the night itself trembled. For the first time, the dogs of the village gathered as one. Some were big, scarred farm dogs. Others were small house pets with thin legs. But all stood together, bristling with fire. Rocky stepped forward, chest lifted high, and let out one long, commanding bark. In that instant, he was no longer a stray, no longer a guest. He was their leader. Night fell hard. The wind howled through the pines. And then from the dark woods a chilling chorus rose. Wolves, dozens of them, their howls rolling like thunder over the valley. Children clung to their mothers. Men lit torches, fear spreading like frost. At the forest's edge, they appeared. A line of shadows, eyes glowing yellow bodies, moving in steady rhythm. At the front stalked the scarred wolf, massive and furious, the same beast Rocky had scarred in battle. Hatred burned in its stare. Rocky barked once, deep and long. The village dogs erupted, their voices joining into a wild roar. They were no longer pets, no longer strays. They were soldiers. The wolves charged. The scarred leader lunged for the chicken coop, jaws wide. Rocky hurled himself into its path. They collided, a storm of fur and teeth, the ground tearing beneath their struggle. Blood flew, fur ripped, but neither yielded an inch. Around them, the field exploded into chaos. Wolves leapt for livestock, but dogs cut them off. A black shepherd slammed into a gray wolf, sending it tumbling into the mud. A terrier no bigger than a rabbit latched onto a wolf's leg and refused to let go, yapping with fury. Farmers swung sticks, torches, flashing their courage, rising at the sight of their dog's defiance. Rocky and the scarred wolf rolled in the dirt, locked in hatred. Jaws snapped, claws slashed. The wolf lunged for Rocky's throat, but he twisted aside and sank his teeth into its shoulder. The beast howled, staggered, then came harder, raking Rocky's side with burning claws. Pain seared through him, but Rocky stood firm, chest heaving, eyes blazing. Everywhere the village dogs fought with uncanny unity. Before the battle, Rocky had split them into groups, and now his plan showed its brilliance. One circle cut behind the barns, blocking escape. Another pushed into the square, driving the pack into confusion. Wherever a wolf turned, a dog was waiting, snarling, snapping, biting. The scarred wolf tried again to break past Rocky, but Rocky met it head-on. Faster than before, he lunged and clamped his jaws around the wolf's throat. They crashed to the ground, rolling, locked in silence, except for tearing breath. With a final surge, Rocky bit down until the beast went limp. The leader was dead. The forest fell still. Wolves froze. Where they stood, their leader broken in the dirt. Fear rippled through them. One by one, they turned, retreating into the trees, eyes fading into the darkness. Their howls died away. The attack was over. The field was wrecked, scattered with feathers, mud, and blood. Dogs stood panting, some wounded, but their tails wagged, their chests heaving with triumph. Farmers shouted with joy, torches raised, high voices carrying into the night. And there, at the center of it all, stood Rocky. His body streaked with blood, his fur matted with sweat, but his stance unbroken. He lifted his head and let out a bark that rolled like thunder across the mountains. It was not the cry of a stray abandoned in the rain. It was the voice of a commander, a warrior, a protector of both man and beast. The dogs answered him, their chorus filling the night. The villagers joined, too, cheering and clapping, some with tears in their eyes. Children shouted his name, Buddy, Buddy, their laughter ringing like bells. That night, the village carved a legend into its heart. They would never forget the night the wolves came for vengeance, and the dogs of the village rose as one under the black-eyed leader who had once wandered in from the mountains. From that moment on, Rocky was no longer just a stray, no longer just a visitor. He was family, he was protector, he was hero. Time in the little village settled into gentle rhythms. Rocky healed the children, adored him, and the old man treated him like family. For the first time in his wandering life, Rocky felt almost at peace, almost as if he had truly found a home. But peace can be fragile. One morning, while repairing a fence on the hillside, the old man faltered. He clutched his chest, breath caught, and collapsed into the grass. Rocky barked wildly, circling him, pawing at his arm, his cries echoing down the valley. Villagers rushed from their homes, carried the old man inside, and hurried him to the nearest clinic. Rocky followed the whole way, heart pounding his voice, breaking the silence of every street. At the clinic, the doctor shook his head gravely. "Your heart is too weak," he said. "You cannot stay out here anymore. You need to be close to a hospital, close to treatment." That evening, a car from the city arrived. A younger man stepped out, the old man's son. His face was tight with worry, as he went straight to the bedside, knelt, and held his father's frail hand. "Dad, please," he begged, voice thick, "come back with me. The city has everything you need, doctors, care, safety. I can't let you stay here. Not anymore." The old man turned his eyes toward the doorway where Rocky lay curled at the threshold, eyes fixed on the house. His whisper was so soft it was almost to himself. "Buddy, how could I leave you?" The son pressed harder, urgency rising in his voice. "If you stay, it could cost your life. Please, Dad, we need you with us." The old man's chest rose slowly. His eyes closed, lines of sorrow deepening across his face. At last he gave a single nod of surrender. "All right," he said, voice breaking. "I will go." News spread quickly. The next morning, villagers gathered to help him pack. They spoke softly, their eyes often straying to Rocky, who followed the old man step for step, tail low, ears pinned back. Rocky watched as the man folded a few shirts, gathered tools, and closed the door of the small wooden house. Each sound, each gesture felt like the end of something sacred. When the car pulled up again, the son loaded the bags, urging his father to hurry. The old man paused, then bent down slowly. His hand trembled as it found Rocky's head, rough fingers running through the dark fur one last time. "Oh, buddy," he murmured, "if only you could come with me. But you belong here. You belong to the mountains." Rocky pressed his muzzle into the man's palm, eyes closing. His chest ached, with a feeling he could not name, something heavier than hunger, sharper than pain. For a moment, he wanted to leap into the car to follow the man who had given him kindness, warmth, and care. But deep inside, another voice called. The dream of his parents, the bloodline that pulsed in his veins, the path that stretched beyond the village. He remembered why he had begun this journey, why he had left the safety of the pack and the comfort of the den. His story was not finished. His truth still waited somewhere in the wild. The old man climbed into the car. Villagers wiped their eyes as the engine roared to life. Rocky stood a few paces back, chest-heaving, paws pressed into the dirt. The old man looked out through the window, eyes shining, and whispered, "Goodbye, buddy." The car rolled away, its dust hanging in the air long after it vanished down the road. Rocky stood motionless, watching until the last sound faded. Villagers came to pat his head to comfort him, but Rocky barely moved. He simply stared at the empty road tail, still heart torn between love and destiny. When night came, Rocky lay before the empty house. The wind rustled the fence. The chickens clucked softly in their coop, but all he could hear was the beating of his own heart. Slowly, he lifted his head and looked toward the mountains. The ridges loomed dark against the sky, but to Rocky they glowed like a beacon. He rose, muscles stiff but steady, and took a step forward. Then another. The leather collar brushed his neck with each stride, reminding him of Ethan, of the wild pair, who once sheltered him, of every moment that had shaped him. Behind him lay love, comfort, and safety. Ahead lay uncertainty, danger, and perhaps loss. But ahead also lay truth. Rocky paused at the edge of the village. He turned once, ears flicking as if listening for the old man's voice. There was only silence. His eyes softened, but he did not falter. He raised his head, drew a deep breath, and set his paws toward the forest once more. The villagers would remember him. The old man would carry his memory into the city. But Rocky's journey could not be stopped. He was the son of the wild, and his story was not yet complete. As the moon climbed high, Rocky's silhouette vanished into the trees, his steps silent but certain. Somewhere beyond those ridges, his parents' shadows still waited, and he would not rest until he found them. After the old man left with his son, Rocky wandered aimlessly. The familiar dirt paths felt empty without the sound of slow, shuffling footsteps beside him, without the gentle voice calling buddy. His black eyes carried a sadness no one could read. He walked on, paws carrying him down the winding mountain road, though he did not know where it would lead. The sun dipped low, bathing the ridges in crimson light. Rocky moved slowly, ears pricked, nose twitching at the strange sense of the world beyond. Then, through the stillness, he heard it, a faint cry, muffled and desperate. His head shot up. He bolted toward the sound, weaving through brush paws, cracking twigs beneath him. Through a break in the trees, Rocky saw something that made his fur bristle. Two men, rough and heavy-shouldered, were dragging a little girl. She couldn't have been more than 8 or 9. A rag gagged her mouth, her hands bound cruelly behind her back. Her wide eyes glistened with tears as her small body twisted helplessly. "Keep her quiet," one man hissed. "Don't worry. By tonight she'll be locked away. Her family will pay plenty to see her again," the other sneered. A growl rose deep in Rocky's chest. His muscles coiled. Then, with a burst of fury, he charged from the shadows, barking so fiercely the men froze. "What the hell? Where'd that dog come from?" one shouted, eyes widening. "Forget the mutt, move. Get her to the truck," the other barked. They dragged the girl faster, throwing terrified glances back at the dark-furred dog closing in. Rocky lunged, snapping at their heels, but they shoved the girl into the back of a rusted pickup. The door slammed, the engine roared, and gravel sprayed as the vehicle tore down the winding road. Rocky skidded to a stop, barking until his throat burned. Dust stung his eyes as the sound of the engine faded. His chest heaved, but he didn't hesitate. Lowering his nose to the ground, he caught the bitter mix of sweat, fear, and tears. That scent became his compass. He ran. The mountain road twisted dangerously, sharp turns cutting along cliffs. Cars honked as Rocky darted across paws, skidding on gravel. Once a truck swerved so close the rush of air nearly knocked him off his feet. He stumbled, claws scraping stone, but pushed forward, eyes locked on the faint red glow of taillights vanishing ahead. Darkness fell. City lights blinked faintly in the distance. Rocky's lungs burned, his paws ached, but he did not stop. The trail led him down into the outskirts, where abandoned warehouses crouched in shadows. There, parked outside a corrugated metal building, was the pickup. Rocky crept closer, ears flat, body low against the ground. Through a broken window, he saw the girl. She sat tied to a chair, her small shoulders shaking, muffled sobs echoing through the hollow room. The two men paced around her. "Tomorrow morning we make the call," one muttered. "Her family's rich. They'll pay. By the time anyone finds this place, we'll be long gone," the other smirked. Rocky's lips curled back, teeth glinting in the dim light. He moved silently along the wall, nose brushing, cold steel, heart pounding with resolve. Inside, the girl lifted her head. Through her tears, she caught a shadow move by the window. Black eyes met hers. For the first time all night, hope flickered across her face. She whispered, muffled under the gag, "Help me." Rocky's muscles tightened. The hunt was not over. Outside, pressed against the cold bricks, Rocky crouched low. His black eyes gleamed in the shadows, ears tuned to every sound inside. He heard the men's rough voices, the scrape of boots, and beneath it all, the fragile whimper of the child. A low rumble built in his chest. One of the men stepped out, yawning, a cigarette dangling from his lips. He flicked his lighter, flame catching, and that was the opening Rocky needed. He exploded from the dark, like a shadow of fury. His jaws locked on the man's wrist, teeth sinking deep. "Ah, damn mutt!" the man screamed, the cigarette falling. He stumbled, clutching his bleeding arm. Rocky released and vanished back into the night. The man staggered inside, shouting, "There's a dog out there. It bit me," the others cursed, grabbing pipes and flashlights. They swung the door wide, beams cutting through the gloom. While they searched outside, Rocky slipped silently through the shattered window, landing on the cold concrete floor. His nose led him straight to the girl. Her tear-streaked eyes widened when she saw him. "Please," she whispered, voice muffled by the gag, "help me." Rocky moved close, gnawing at the ropes. He tugged, tore, until the strands snapped. The girl gasped, rubbing her raw wrists, clutching his fur with trembling hands. "Good boy, don't leave me." But footsteps thundered. The men burst back in flashlights, slicing through the gloom. Their beams froze on the pair, one exhausted little girl, one dark-furred dog standing guard in front of her. "There it is," one roared. "Kill it." Rocky bristled, body coiled, growl echoing like thunder. One lunged with a pipe. Rocky dodged, jaws clamping onto his leg. The man screamed, collapsing. The second swung his weapon hard. Metal struck Rocky's ribs with a crack, pain searing through him, but he didn't fall. He hurled himself forward, slamming the man against the wall. "Shoot at the injured one," cried, fumbling for a pistol. Before he could fire, the girl screamed, "Help somebody, please." Her cry rang out into the night, piercing the quiet streets beyond. The commotion carried. Neighbors stirred, voices rose, lights flicked on in distant windows. Sirens wailed faintly, then closer, louder. The kidnappers panicked. "We have to go," one shouted. They grabbed at each other, limping toward the back exit. Their plans, their threats, their power all crumbling under the sound of barking, screaming, and sirens. Rocky stood firm, chest heaving, blood seeping from a fresh gash along his side. His eyes never left them until the door slammed and their footsteps vanished into the night. Then, silence. Only the girl's sobs and Rocky's ragged breathing filled the vast warehouse. She stumbled forward, dropping to her knees beside him, throwing her arms around his neck. "You saved me, you really saved me." Rocky lowered his head, pressing his muzzle gently against her shoulder. His body trembled with exhaustion, but his tail gave the faintest wag. Moments later, the doors burst open again, not with criminals, but with flashing lights and shouting officers. They froze. At the sight, the girl safe, clutching a battered dog, while the scent of blood and fear still hung thick in the air. "My God," one officer whispered. "That dog, it protected her." The girl nodded fiercely through her tears. "He's not just a dog. He's my hero." And under the harsh glow of the police flashlights, Rocky stood tall despite his wounds, no longer a nameless stray, but a guardian whose courage had turned the tide. Rocky staggered, his hind legs dragging, leaving a thin trail of red across the concrete floor. Yet even as his strength drained, he stood in front of the little girl guarding her, until he saw the officers lift her into her mother's arms. Only then did a faint whimper escape his throat. His body trembled, blood loss weakening him, but his eyes stayed sharp, watching until the child was safe. The mother wept, clutching her daughter tightly. When her gaze fell on Rocky, she froze. In front of her was not just a stray dog, but the savior who had pulled her child back from the hands of evil. "Oh my God, he's hurt so badly," she cried. One officer stepped forward, but she raised her hand quickly. "Don't touch him. Let me. I'm a veterinarian." She moved slowly, carefully, her voice soft and steady. "Easy now, boy, don't be afraid. I'll help you." Rocky growled weakly, his body shivering with pain. But when he felt the warmth of her hand on his head, his eyes softened. He allowed her to press a cloth against his wounds, even as crimson stains spread across the fabric. The little girl, still streaked with tears, wrapped her arms around his neck and whispered through sobs, "Don't leave me, please don't leave me." The ambulance arrived. Officers shouted orders. Neighbors murmured about the kidnapping, but the woman stood firm. Her voice carried steady and certain above the noise. "He saved my daughter. I will not let him die out here. I'm taking him with me." No one argued. They only looked at Rocky with awe in their eyes. That night, in a warm little home on the outskirts of the city, Rocky lay on a clean blanket inside the woman's veterinary room. The air carried the sharp scent of antiseptic. Golden light spilled over his blood-soaked fur. With careful hands, she stitched his wounds, cleaned away dirt and blood, and dressed each cut. Rocky whimpered, his body jerking at the sting, but he didn't resist. He lifted his eyes to hers, dark and heavy with sorrow, yet filled with trust. Beside him, the little girl never moved. Her small hand clung tightly to his paw, her voice breaking as she asked, "Mom, he's not going to die, is he?" The woman smiled gently, her voice calm and sure. "No, sweetheart. He's strong. He'll make it." When the bandages were tied, Rocky lay still, breath ragged, but slowly evening out. The girl leaned close, her lips brushing his ear, as she whispered, "Thank you, buddy, from now on. I'll take care of you." Rocky's eyes slid half shut, but his tail tapped faintly against the floor, a silent reply. And in that moment, for the first time in his wandering life, Rocky felt something overwhelming yet unfamiliar. Not the cold comfort of the forest, not the harsh bond of a pack, but the warmth of a human home, the warmth of family. Morning light slipped gently through the small window, spilling across the quiet room where Rocky lay. Birds sang in the garden, outside, their notes bright against the stillness. For the first time in many long months, Rocky woke not beneath storm clouds or in the cold of the forest, but on a clean blanket in a warm room, filled with the scent of medicine and golden sunlight. His body still ached, his wounds wrapped carefully in fresh bandages. Slowly, he pushed himself to his feet, limping a little, his dark eyes scanning the space around him with quiet caution. This place was unfamiliar yet safe. From beyond the door came the faint clatter of pans in the kitchen and the smell of food drifting through the air. The door creaked open. The little girl stepped inside, her face lighting up when she saw him standing. "Buddy," she cried, running forward to throw her arms around his neck. Her tiny hands clung to him the way they had the night before, as though she feared he might vanish if she let go. Rocky stiffened at first, ears twitching, but then his eyes softened. His tail gave a small, uncertain wag. Behind her came the woman carrying a wooden bowl. Inside was fresh water and tender strips of meat. She set it down before him, her voice warm and steady. "Eat, brave boy. You need your strength to heal." Rocky lowered his muzzle, sniffing carefully. The smell stirred memories of the old man's cabin, of the warmth of firelight, of kindness he thought he had lost forever. Slowly, bite by bite, he ate, while the girl sat beside him, watching with joy in her eyes. When he finished, she led him to the porch. The world here was unlike the harsh mountains he had known. A small garden stretched before him, a row of green trees, a wooden swing swaying gently in the breeze. Neighbors passed along the lane, some smiling children stopping to stare at the dark-furred newcomer. Rocky hesitated, ears folding back, paws shifting nervously. But the little girl touched his back softly. "Don't be afraid, buddy. You're safe now." He didn't understand the words, but he understood the tone. Warmth spread through him. He lowered his body beside her, lifting his head to the sunlight streaming through the leaves. In that moment, something inside him shifted. No longer the wary stray. No longer the lonely wanderer. For the first time, Rocky felt truly welcomed. That morning in the little house of a mother and her daughter, a new chapter began. And Rocky understood his journey was not only about searching for the past, it was also about finding a home where he belonged. The days that followed were unlike anything Rocky had ever known. Each morning he woke to the sound of the little girl's laughter and the gentle voice of her mother calling from the kitchen. The smells of warm bread, coffee, and home-cooked meals drifted through the air, scents so different from the cold pine and raw earth of the wilderness. Rocky was cautious at first. He would pace the edges of the yard, sniffing every corner, ears flicking at the sound of passing cars or strangers' voices. But the little girl was always there, her hand brushing his back, her giggle chasing away the shadows. "It's okay, buddy," she would say. "You're safe." And slowly, Rocky began to believe her. Neighbors grew used to seeing the dark-furred dog lying on the porch or walking beside the girl down the lane. Children, who had once stared in fear, now ran to greet him, offering pats on his head or scraps of cookies stolen from home. At first, Rocky froze, uncertain, but as the days passed, he no longer flinched. He met them with gentle eyes and a tail that wagged slowly at first, then with quiet joy. Inside the house, he found comfort in small things. The soft blanket spread in the corner just for him. The water bowl always full. The girl's hand resting on his paw each night before she fell asleep. And in the dim light of the veterinary room, he would watch her mother tending to sick cats, injured birds, or frightened strays. Rocky lay close, as if guarding both healer and healed. For the first time, he felt not only cared for, but useful part of a home with purpose. Yet even in peace, memories lingered. At times, Rocky would stand by the window, nose pressed to the glass, eyes fixed on the faraway ridges. In the hush of night, he would hear the wind through the trees and feel a tug deep in his chest. The call of the wild had not vanished. It whispered still of parents he had never found, of a destiny unfinished. The woman noticed. She would kneel by his side, stroking the dark fur between his ears. "Don't worry, boy," she whispered. "Whatever road you choose, you'll never be alone again." The girl, too, seemed to understand. One evening, as she laid her cheek against his neck, she whispered, "Even if you leave one day, buddy, you'll always be my hero." Rocky closed his eyes at her words. His tail brushed gently against the floor, a silent promise he could not put into words. In those days, Rocky discovered something he had never known before: the rhythm of ordinary life. The joy of belonging, not just for a moment, but for a season. It was a gift, fragile and fleeting, yet precious beyond measure.